The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the Corvan battlecruiser Iron Fang. Admiral Thexara stood with his forearms crossed behind his back, watching the endless darkness of space. His red eyes scanned the sensor displays that showed nothing but empty void. It had been a quiet patrol, just like the last 100 patrols before it. The Galactic Council called this sector the neutral zone. No single species owned it, and no military forces were supposed to enter without permission. But everyone sent scouts anyway. The 5 great powers of the galaxy always watched each other, even during times of peace. Thexara had fought in the border wars 20 years ago. He remembered when Corvan ships traded plasma fire with Zephyrian quantum fighters near the Vega system. Thousands died in those battles. The Treaty of Equilibrium ended that war, and created the balance that kept peace today. Each of the 5 major species controlled their own sectors and maintained equal military strength. Nobody could conquer anyone else without starting a war they could not win. The Corvan Empire was the strongest in direct combat. Their ships had thick armor and powerful weapons. They bred warriors who lived for battle. But the Zephyrians had technology that bent space and time. Their quantum drives could make ships appear and disappear across vast distances. The ethereal collective fought with their minds, turning enemy crews against each other without firing a shot. The swarm republics grew their ships like living creatures that could heal damage and adapt to any weapon. The ancient Valdderan hegemony possessed secrets from before the other species even reached space. Together, these 5 powers had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. The balance between them kept smaller species safe and trade routes open. Wars still happened, but they were small conflicts that never threatened the greater peace. Thexara's second-in-command, Commander Vextar, approached with a data pad in his clawed hands. "Admiral, long-range patrol reports are coming in from all sectors." "Nothing unusual to report." "Good," Thexara replied. "The council meeting next month should be peaceful then. The trade agreements are working well." Vextar nodded. The younger Corvan had never seen a major war. He thought peace was normal. Thexara envied him for that innocence. The Admiral knew how quickly peace could shatter when the balance shifted. The bridge was quiet except for the soft beeping of sensors and the hum of the ship's engines. 30 crew members worked at their stations, monitoring space around them. The Iron Fang was a medium cruiser, not the largest ship in the Corvan fleet, but still powerful enough to destroy most enemies it might face. Lieutenant Kexran called out from the sensor station. "Admiral, I'm getting some strange readings from Grid 77 Alpha." "Strange how?" Thexara walked over to look at the displays. "Energy signatures that don't match anything in our database. The readings are massive, sir," Thexara frowned. His people had been mapping space for centuries. They knew the energy patterns of every known ship design, every type of space station, every natural phenomenon that could appear on sensors. Could it be a solar flare? Sometimes the Rigel system sends out unusual radiation. "No, sir. This is artificial. Definitely a constructed object. But it's not showing up on visual scans. That's impossible. Nothing that large could hide from our sensors." Kexran's hands moved over his controls, checking and rechecking the readings. "Sir, the energy signature just appeared. One moment space was empty, the next moment this thing was there. No jump trail, no wormhole distortion, no quantum wake. It just materialized." Thexara felt cold worry creep up his spine. In 30 years of military service, he had never heard of technology that could make something appear from nowhere. Even the advanced Zephyrians left traces when they jumped through space. "How large?" "Approximately 12 kilometers long, sir. Roughly the size of a Valdderan dreadnought." The Admiral's blood turned to ice. Valdderan dreadnoughts were the largest warships in known space. They could crack planets and destroy entire fleets. If something that size had appeared without warning in the neutral zone, it meant the balance of power might be about to change. "Signal the fleet. Battle stations." Alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Red lights flashed as crew members ran to their positions. The Iron Fang had been built for war, and within minutes it was ready to fight. "Sir, I'm trying to get a visual on the contact, but it's not reflecting our scanner beams properly. It's like the hull is absorbing our signals. Keep trying, and send a priority message to Corvan High Command. They need to know about this immediately." The massive view screen at the front of the bridge flickered and changed to show a magnified view of the area where sensors detected the unknown object. At first there was only darkness. Then Kexran adjusted the image filters and slowly a shape began to appear. Thexara had seen many starships in his career, but this one was different. It was long and angular, with surfaces that seemed to eat light rather than reflect it. Strange geometric patterns covered the hull, and weapons ports were visible along its sides. But the most disturbing thing was how it hung in space without moving. No ship stayed perfectly still. Even at rest, vessels drifted slightly due to gravitational forces and solar winds. This ship was motionless, as if space itself held it in place. Sir, I'm detecting power signatures unlike anything in our database. The energy readings suggest weapons systems far beyond current galactic standards. Are you certain? Yes, sir. Whatever built this ship has technology we've never seen before. Commander Vextar stepped closer to Thexara. Should we contact the other powers? If this is a new threat, we should work together. The Admiral considered this. The Treaty of Equilibrium required all major powers to share information about unknown contacts in neutral space. But it also meant revealing Corvin military positions and capabilities to their rivals. If this unknown ship proved to be hostile, every second of preparation could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Send coded messages to the Zephyrian Federation, Ethereal Collective, Swarm Republics, and Valdderan Hegemony. Tell them we have an unknown contact in the neutral zone and request immediate assistance. But keep our specific location and ship strength classified until they arrive. Understood, sir. Thexara watched the alien ship on the screen. It showed no signs of movement or hostile intent, but something about its presence made his warrior instincts scream danger. In his experience, the most dangerous enemies were often the ones that appeared calm. Sir, incoming transmission from the contact. Put it through. The bridge fell silent as everyone waited to hear from the mysterious vessel, but no words came. Instead, the communication system received only a series of mathematical equations and star charts. The data was complex but clearly intelligent in origin. What does it mean? Vextar asked. I'm not sure. It could be an attempt at communication, or it might be scanning our systems. Lieutenant Kexran looked up from his station with worry in his eyes. Admiral, the mathematical sequences include information about our ship's design specifications. Details that should be classified. Thexara felt his stomach drop. That's impossible. Our hull composition and weapon systems are military secrets. Sir, the data suggests they know exactly what kind of ship we are, how many crew we carry, and what our maximum weapons output is. The Admiral stared at the alien vessel on the screen. Whatever had built that ship possessed intelligence-gathering capabilities beyond anything the galaxy had seen. It could scan through their shields and armor to read classified information stored in their computers. How long until the other fleets arrive? The Zephyrians will be here first. Their quantum drives are fast. Probably 6 hours. The others will take longer. 6 hours felt like forever when facing an enemy that knew your every weakness. Thexara had commanded ships in battle before, but this was different. He was used to fighting enemies he understood, whose capabilities he could predict. This alien vessel was completely unknown, possibly more advanced than anything in the galaxy. Sir, should we attempt direct communication? Thexara thought carefully. Making first contact with an unknown species was usually a diplomatic matter, handled by specially trained ambassadors. But they were alone in space with no backup and facing a ship that might be hostile. Military protocol demanded caution, open a channel, standard first contact procedures. The communications officer activated the transmission array. Thexara straightened his uniform and faced the view screen, knowing that his words might determine whether this encounter led to peace or war. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Thexara of the Corvin Empire battlecruiser Iron Fang. You have entered the neutral zone established by the Galactic Council. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. The reply came immediately, but not in words. Instead, the alien ship began to move. It rotated slowly, bringing more weapon ports to bear on the Iron Fang. The movement was smooth and precise, showing perfect control despite the vessel's enormous size. Sir, they're targeting us. Raise shields. Charge weapons, but do not fire unless fired upon. The bridge crew worked frantically as the unknown ship completed its rotation. It now faced them directly, its dark hull bristling with weapons that could probably destroy them with a single volley. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the alien vessel transmitted a new message. This time it came as audio, spoken in perfect Corvin military language. Admiral Thexara, You may stand down your weapons. We are not here to fight you today. The voice was calm and measured, but there was something strange about it. The accent was unfamiliar, and the word choices seemed slightly old-fashioned, as if the speaker had learned Corvan from ancient texts rather than living speakers. Who are you? Thexara demanded. That information will be shared when representatives from all 5 major powers have arrived. We have been patient for a very long time. We can wait a few more hours. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Thexara stared at the alien ship, his mind racing with questions. Who were these people? How did they know Corvan language and military protocols? Why were they waiting for all 5 powers to gather? Most importantly, what did they want? The next 6 hours would be the longest of Admiral Thexara's life. As word spread through the galaxy that an unknown supership had appeared in the neutral zone, fleets began moving from every corner of civilized space. The balance of power that had kept peace for generations was about to be tested by a force that nobody understood. The alien vessel hung in space like a dark omen, waiting for the galaxy's greatest powers to come within range of its weapons. Thexara could only hope that when the truth was finally revealed, it wouldn't mean the end of everything they had built. The Zephyrian quantum cruiser Temporal Edge materialized first, appearing in a flash of blue light 3 kilometers from Admiral Thexara's position. Commander Zixhai stood on the bridge of the sleek vessel, her silver skin reflecting the glow of holographic displays. Zephyrians were tall and thin, with large eyes that could see across multiple dimensions of space and time. Corvan vessel, this is Commander Zixhai. We received your transmission about an unknown contact. Thexara opened a communication channel. Commander, the alien ship is 12 kilometers to your starboard. It appeared 6 hours ago without any jump signature. Zixhai's ship turned to face the mysterious vessel. Even through the communication link, Thexara could hear her intake of breath. By the quantum void, I've never seen anything like that design. Within the next hour, 3 more fleets arrived in the neutral zone. The ethereal collective sent 5 ships that moved in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls glowing with psychic energy. Each vessel contained 100 ethereal minds linked together in shared consciousness. They communicated without words, their thoughts flowing between ships like streams of light. The Swarm Republic's bioships emerged from subspace looking like giant insects made of metal and flesh. Their hulls were covered in sensor organs that twitched and moved, constantly adapting to new threats. The ships could heal damage by growing new armor plates, and their weapons were living creatures that fired acid or plasma at their enemies. Last to arrive was the Valdderan dreadnought Ancient Glory, a massive wedge-shaped vessel that had been built when most other species were still primitive. The Valdderans themselves were rarely seen, preferring to communicate through holographic projections. Their technology was so old that other species could barely understand how it worked, but it was still more advanced than anything they could build today. Admiral Thexara found himself in command of the largest military gathering in the neutral zone's history. 5 different species, 37 warships, and enough firepower to destroy several solar systems, all focused on one alien vessel that continued to hang motionless in space. "This is Captain Mordan of the Valdderan hegemony," came a voice over the communication channels. The Valdderans spoke in the ancient trade language that all species learned for diplomatic meetings. "We have scanned the unknown vessel and confirmed that its technology is not in our databases." Commander Zixhai's voice joined the conversation. "Zephyrian quantum analysis shows energy patterns that shouldn't be possible. The ship appears to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. The ethereal collective added their findings through telepathic broadcast that reached every mind in the assembled fleet. Their shared thoughts revealed that the alien ship somehow blocked psychic scanning, creating a mental void where no thoughts could penetrate. The Swarm Republic's bioships released clouds of microscopic organisms to analyze the alien vessel's hull composition. Within minutes, they reported that the metal contained elements not found on any known periodic table. Thexara listened to all these reports with growing unease. Each species had found something impossible about the alien ship. Together, their findings suggested they were dealing with technology far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. "Unknown vessel," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You are surrounded by the combined fleets of the 5 major galactic powers. Identify yourself immediately." The response came not as words, but as action. A small craft launched from the alien ship's belly, no larger than a Corvan fighter. It accelerated toward the assembled fleets with impossible speed, moving faster than any ship should be able to travel in normal space. All ships, battle stations. Thexara ordered. The gathered fleets opened fire with everything they had. Corvin plasma cannons sent streams of superheated energy toward the approaching craft. Zephyrian quantum torpedoes bent space and time to strike their target from multiple angles at once. Ethereal mind weapons tried to overwhelm the pilot's consciousness. Swarm acid creatures launched themselves like living missiles. Valdderan energy beams that could cut through planets lanced out across space. The small craft dodged every attack. It moved like liquid mercury, flowing between energy beams and sliding past explosions. When quantum torpedoes tried to hit it from multiple dimensions, the craft simply wasn't there anymore. When psychic attacks reached for the pilot's mind, they found nothing to grasp. The biomissiles dissolved when they came near the craft's hull, as if something was neutralizing their molecular structure. Impossible, whispered Commander Zixai. Nothing can move like that. But the alien craft wasn't just dodging. As it weaved between the attacking fleets, it fired back with weapons that shouldn't have existed. Small beams of energy lanced out from the craft, striking specific points on each attacking ship. The beams didn't destroy their targets, but they did something worse. They shut them down. Each beam hit a different ship in a different way, but the result was always the same. Systems failed, weapons stopped working, and engines went offline. The Corvin plasma cannons overloaded their own power cores. The Zephyrian quantum drives created feedback loops that trapped the ships between dimensions. The ethereal mind weapons turned back on their own operators, causing confusion and panic. The swarm bioships suddenly couldn't control their living components, which began attacking each other. The Valdderan dreadnought's ancient system simply stopped responding to commands. Within 5 minutes, 37 of the galaxy's most advanced warships were floating helpless in space. The alien craft completed one final loop around the disabled fleet, then returned to its mothership. Thexara watched from the bridge of the Iron Fang, which was now running on emergency power after its main systems had been surgically disabled. "Sir," Lieutenant Kexran called out from his station. "Incoming transmission from the unknown vessel. Put it through." The voice that came over the communication system was different from the one they had heard earlier. This speaker sounded female, with an accent that was strangely familiar yet impossible to place. "Attention, representatives of the Corvin Empire, Zephyrian Federation, Ethereal Collective, Swarm Republics, and Valdderan Hegemony. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Retribution. We've been watching your civilizations for a very long time. The children's games end now." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member stared at the communication console as if it had spoken impossible words. Earth. The word sent chills through every person listening. Earth was a legend, a cautionary tale told in military academies and history classes. It was the homeworld of a species that had tried to expand into the galaxy 3,000 years ago, only to be destroyed by the Valdderan hegemony before they could become a threat. Humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. Commander Vextar was the first to speak. "Sir, that's impossible. The humans died millennia ago. The Valdderans made sure of that." But even as he said the words, pieces began falling into place in Thexara's mind. The strange accent he had heard earlier wasn't unfamiliar after all. It was archaic Corvin, the kind that might be learned from old historical records. The ship's technology that seemed to combine elements from all 5 major powers. The way the alien craft had known exactly how to disable each different type of vessel. "Captain Chen," Thexara said carefully, "if you are truly human, prove it." The reply came immediately, and this time the main view screen activated to show the interior of the alien ship's bridge. The figure standing in the center was bipedal, and roughly the same size as most galactic species, but there were differences. Her skin was pale, her hair was dark brown, and her eyes were a color that none of the major species possessed. Blue like deep ocean water. But what made Thexara's blood run cold wasn't her appearance. It was what surrounded her. The bridge was filled with display screens, showing detailed information about every ship in the assembled fleet. Technical specifications, crew numbers, weapon capabilities, shield frequencies. Everything was laid out as if the humans had been studying them for years. "Admiral Thexara of the Corvin Empire," Captain Chen said, reading from one of the displays. "Born on Corvin Prime 47 years ago. graduated from the military academy with honors, fought in the border wars against the Zephyrians, has 2 mates and 4 offspring. Currently commands the battlecruiser Iron Fang, which carries a crew of 30 and is armed with plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and defensive shields that operate on frequency 779.4. She turned to look at different screens as she continued. Commander Zixhai of the Zephyrian Federation, age unknown due to temporal displacement abilities, pilots the quantum cruiser Temporal Edge, which can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but has a weakness in its quantum matrix that can be exploited by properly tuned energy pulses. The human's gaze moved to another display. The ethereal collective ships contain a combined consciousness of 500 individuals, but their psychic network becomes vulnerable to feedback when exposed to certain electromagnetic frequencies. The swarm bioships can heal most damage but cannot adapt to molecular disruptors that target their genetic structure. The Valdderan Dreadnought Ancient Glory is powered by a zero-point energy core that has been operating for over 2,000 years. But its control systems still use quantum computing methods that can be hacked with the right algorithms. Captain Chen stepped forward, and her image on the screen seemed to look directly at each viewer. We know everything about you. We've been watching, learning, and preparing for this moment since the day you destroyed our world. The communication channel erupted with voices as representatives from all 5 powers began shouting questions and demands. But Captain Chen raised her hand for silence, and somehow her gesture commanded attention, despite being transmitted across space. You want proof that we're human? She smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. 3,000 years ago, the Valdderan hegemony detected human expansion into the Centauri system. They declared us a potential threat and destroyed Earth with planet-killer weapons before we could establish more than a few small colonies. She paused, and her voice became colder. What the Valdderans didn't know was that several human ships had already left the solar system on deep exploration missions. We weren't destroyed, we were scattered. The implications hit Thexara like a physical blow. If humans had survived and spent 3 millennia preparing for this moment, if they had been watching and learning from the galaxy's major powers all this time, then everything had changed. What do you want? He asked. Captain Chen's smile disappeared entirely. Justice, reparations, and a new order that ensures no species ever faces extinction for the crime of reaching for the stars. The transmission ended, leaving the assembled fleets floating helplessly in space while the human ship waited for their response. In the space of 1 hour, the balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for 1,000 years had been completely shattered. The children's games, as Captain Chen had called them, were indeed over. But the real war was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 12 hours after Captain Chen's revelation. Representatives from all 5 major powers gathered aboard the neutral station Harmony Point, their usual meeting place for diplomatic discussions. But this was no ordinary diplomatic meeting. The humans had agreed to send an envoy, and nobody knew what to expect. Admiral Thexara sat at the Corvin delegation table, still shaken by what he had witnessed. His ship was currently being repaired by human technicians who had arrived in small craft from the Retribution. The repairs were proceeding faster than should have been possible, as if the humans understood Corvin technology better than the Corvin engineers themselves. Supreme Commander Yal Seth of the Valdderan hegemony occupied the central position in the council chamber. She was ancient even by Valdderan standards, old enough to have personally authorized the destruction of Earth 3,000 years ago. Her holographic projection flickered slightly, betraying what might have been nervousness. The human delegation should arrive within the hour, announced Council Secretary Vrimax, a neutral species that had served as mediators for generations. All parties have agreed to observe standard diplomatic protocols during these discussions. Commander Zixhai leaned forward at the Zephyrian table. How do we know they'll honor those protocols? They just disabled 37 warships without breaking a sweat. Because they want to talk, replied Mindspeaker Eshtaler of the Ethereal Collective. Her crystalline form pulsed with soft light as she shared her thoughts. Our psychic probes detected no hostile intent from their ship. Only patience. They have waited a very long time for this moment. Hive Queen Vizek of the Swarm Republics clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Our bioships analyzed the human craft that attacked us. The molecular structure of its hull contains elements from Corvin armor plating, Zephyrian quantum crystals, ethereal psi-conductors, swarm adaptive polymers, and Valdderan neutronium. They have been studying all of us. Supreme Commander Yalseth's projection turned to face the swarm representative. That's impossible. Many of those materials are classified military secrets. Apparently not to the humans. Hive Queen Vizik buzzed. They have had 3,000 years to observe our technological development. Every ship that has been destroyed in battle, every trade vessel that has been captured, every scientific breakthrough that has been published, they have learned from all of it. The massive doors to the council chamber opened with a soft hiss. Captain Sarah Chen walked in, followed by 2 other humans. The 3 figures moved with quiet confidence, showing no signs of fear despite being surrounded by representatives of the powers that had destroyed their homeworld. Thexara studied the humans carefully. They looked remarkably similar to several galactic species, which explained how they had been able to infiltrate other civilizations undetected. But there were subtle differences that marked them as something unique. Their eyes held an intelligence that seemed both ancient and young. Their movements were precise and economical, like warriors who had trained for battle every day of their lives. Captain Chen took her place at a table that had been hastily prepared for the human delegation. Her 2 companions remained standing behind her, their hands resting casually near weapons that didn't look like any technology the Council had seen before. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Captain Chen said. Her voice carried easily across the chamber without amplification. "I am Captain Sarah Chen, Commander of the UES Retribution and current speaker for the Terran Colonial Authority. These are Colonel Marcus Webb, our military liaison, and Dr. Elena Vasquez, our chief scientist and cultural expert." Supreme Commander Yalseth leaned forward in her chair. "Terran Colonial Authority? How many of you survived?" "Enough," Captain Chen replied simply. "When Earth was destroyed, 17 deep space exploration ships were beyond the kill zone. Those ships carried approximately 50,000 humans in total. We've spent the last 3 millennia building new colonies in the void between galaxies, places where your sensors could never find us." She activated a small device on her table, and holographic images appeared above the council chamber. The images showed vast structures floating in empty space, cities built inside asteroids, agricultural stations that grew food in zero gravity, and shipyards where vessels were constructed using techniques that combined technologies from all 5 major galactic powers. "We call it the Deep Fleet," Captain Chen continued. "Mobile colonies that can move between star systems without leaving traces. We've survived by being what you forced us to become. Ghosts in the darkness, learning your secrets while remaining invisible ourselves." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward and activated her own device. New images appeared showing detailed schematics of ships, weapons, and technologies from all 5 civilizations. "Every species in this chamber has contributed to our survival, though none of you realized it. We've studied wreckage from your wars, intercepted your communications, and infiltrated your societies." Admiral Thexara felt his stomach clench. "Infiltrated how?" "Humans are remarkably adaptable," Dr. Vasquez explained. "With the right genetic modifications and cybernetic implants, we can pass for almost any species. We've had agents embedded in your governments, your militaries, and your research institutions for centuries." The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted accusations at each other, each faction suspecting the others of harboring human spies. Supreme Commander Yalseth's projection flickered more violently as she processed this information. Captain Chen waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "We didn't come here for revenge, though we would have been justified in seeking it. We came because the galaxy is about to face a threat that will require all of our species to work together." "What threat?" demanded Commander Zixhai. Colonel Webb spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen combat. "While you've been maintaining your precious balance of power, something has been growing in the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. We've detected massive structures being built, ships larger than anything in your fleets, and energy signatures that suggest weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds." He activated his own holographic display, showing long-range sensor data from the edge of the galaxy. The images were grainy and distorted, but they clearly showed artificial constructions of enormous size moving slowly toward inhabited space. "We don't know who's building them or what they want," Colonel Webb continued, "but our projections suggest they'll reach the outer colonies within 50 years. When they do, the current balance of power won't matter. You'll need every advantage you can get. Supreme Commander Yalseth studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. Her people had been monitoring the galactic rim for millennia, but these structures were in regions they had never explored. Why should we trust this information? You could be fabricating these images to manipulate us. Captain Chen's expression hardened. Because we've already lost colonies to them. 3 human settlements in the outer void have gone silent in the past decade. When we sent scouts to investigate, we found nothing but empty space and trace radiation that suggests matter conversion on a massive scale. The implications sent chills through every representative in the chamber. If an unknown enemy was already attacking human colonies, it was only a matter of time before they reached the main galaxy. Dr. Vasquez continued the presentation. Our analysis suggests these entities use technology based on dark matter manipulation. They can convert regular matter into dark matter and vice versa, which explains how they can build such massive structures without depleting local resources. Dark matter weapons would be unstoppable by conventional shields, whispered Mindspeaker Eshtalar. The ethereal's crystalline form dimmed as she contemplated the horror of such technology. Exactly, Captain Chen said, which is why we're proposing an alliance. Humans have developed countermeasures that might work against dark matter manipulation, but we'll need the combined industrial capacity and military resources of all 5 major powers to implement them on a galactic scale. Admiral Thexara leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The humans had presented them with an impossible choice: accept alliance with the species they had tried to extinct, or face annihilation at the hands of an unknown enemy. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Captain Chen activated a new set of holographic displays showing detailed plans for military cooperation, technology sharing, and joint colonial ventures. Full integration of human technology with existing galactic infrastructure, shared command structures for military operations, and most importantly, the establishment of a new governing body that ensures no species can ever again face extinction for political reasons. You're talking about dismantling the current power structure, Supreme Commander Yalseth said carefully. We're talking about evolving beyond it, Dr. Vasquez replied. The Treaty of Equilibrium was designed to maintain balance between 5 roughly equal powers. But you're not equal anymore, and you haven't been for centuries. Each of your civilizations has stagnated while trying to maintain the status quo. She gestured to new images that showed comparative technological development charts. Corvin military technology has barely improved in 200 years because innovation might upset the balance. Zephyrian quantum research has been limited by treaties that prevent them from exploring certain fields. Ethereal psychic development has been constrained by agreements designed to keep them from becoming too powerful. The swarm has been prevented from expanding their biotechnology beyond certain parameters, and the Valdderans have been hoarding ancient knowledge instead of sharing it with younger species. Meanwhile, Colonel Webb added, humans have been advancing constantly because we had no choice. We couldn't afford to stagnate while hiding in the deep void. Every generation of our people has pushed the boundaries of what's possible, because our survival depended on it. Captain Chen stood up and faced each delegation in turn. We're offering you 3,000 years of technological advancement, freely shared, weapons that can counter dark matter manipulation, ships that can travel between galaxies, manufacturing techniques that can build megastructures in decades instead of centuries. All of it at your disposal, in exchange for true cooperation instead of suspicious balance. The council chamber fell silent as representatives considered the magnitude of what was being offered. The humans weren't just proposing an alliance, they were offering to lift galactic civilization to an entirely new level. But the price was accepting that the old order was dead. Supreme Commander Yalseth was the first to speak. And if we refuse? Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her blue eyes. Then you'll face the coming darkness with the same technology that failed to stop us. And when the unknown enemy arrives at your borders, they'll find civilizations that spent more time watching each other than preparing for real threats. She sat back down and folded her hands on the table. The choice is yours, but choose quickly. We've waited 3,000 years for justice. The entities at the galactic rim won't wait that long to finish what they've started. The meeting was adjourned for private consultations, but everyone in the chamber knew that everything had changed. The balance of power wasn't just shifting, it was being completely rewritten by a species that had been thought extinct for millennia. And in the deep void beyond the galaxy's edge, something vast and hungry continued its slow journey toward the light. 3 days after the council meeting, the galaxy began to tear itself apart. It started with the Corvan Empire. General Kexmalar, commander of the Corvan Third Fleet, received encrypted intelligence data from human sources revealing that Zephyrian quantum researchers had been secretly developing temporal weapons in violation of the Treaty of Equilibrium. The data included detailed plans, test results, and communication records between Zephyrian military officials discussing how to use time manipulation technology against Corvan forces. Within hours of receiving this information, Kexmalar had mobilized his entire fleet and launched a preemptive strike against the Zephyrian research station at Proxima Void. The attack destroyed 3 years of quantum research and killed over 200 scientists, marking the first act of open warfare between major powers in 8 centuries. The Zephyrian Federation responded by revealing their own intelligence about Corvan activities. Captain Chen's people had provided them with evidence that the Corvans had been building secret weapons platforms in neutral space, disguised as mining operations. Worse, the platforms were equipped with reality anchor technology stolen from ancient Valdderan archives. Commander Zixhai addressed the Zephyrian Council from the bridge of her battlecruiser. The Corvans have been preparing to trap our ships in normal space-time, preventing us from using quantum drives to escape. This is an act of war that cannot go unanswered. The Zephyrian response was swift and devastating. Quantum strike teams materialized inside Corvan fortress worlds, bypassing all conventional defenses. They didn't attack civilians, but they systematically destroyed military installations and government buildings before vanishing back into dimensional space. Admiral Thexara watched the destruction of Corvan Prime's orbital defense grid from the bridge of his damaged cruiser. The human technicians had finished repairing his ship's systems, but he almost wished they hadn't. Now he had a front-row seat to watch his civilization's military might crumble under Zephyrian assault. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Human Command." Captain Chen's voice came over the channel, calm and professional despite the chaos unfolding across the galaxy. "Admiral Thexara, we're prepared to offer military assistance to Corvan forces, but we'll need formal authorization from your government." "What kind of assistance?" Thexara asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Our ships can counter Zephyrian quantum technology. We've been studying their dimensional manipulation techniques for centuries, but helping you means entering the war directly, which changes our diplomatic position with all major powers." Thexara looked at his tactical displays, which showed Corvan fleets being systematically destroyed by enemies they couldn't hit back against. The pride of his species was being humbled by an enemy that could attack from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "What would you want in return?" "Access to Corvan military codes and strategic databases. Full intelligence sharing regarding your defensive capabilities and planned operations, and agreement that when this war ends, the Corvan Empire will support the establishment of a new galactic government." The Admiral closed his eyes and made the decision that would seal his species' fate. "Agreed. Send your ships." Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy. The Ethereal Collective discovered that the Swarm Republics had been using bioweapons to secretly influence the minds of other species' populations. Entire colonies of ethereals found their psychic abilities being dampened by engineered viruses that had been spreading through trade goods for decades. Mind Speaker. Eshtaler broadcasted her outrage across all psychic networks. "The swarm has been poisoning our children's minds, making them unable to join the collective consciousness. This is genocide by biological warfare." The ethereal response was terrifyingly elegant. They reached out with their collective psychic power and took control of the swarm's bioships, turning the living vessels against their own creators. Entire swarm fleets found themselves unable to control their own weapons as ethereal. Minds guided biocreatures to attack swarm colonies instead of their intended targets, Hive Queen. Vizix screamed her defiance as her own ships turned against her. "We will not be enslaved by mind thieves. The bioforms have been programmed with safeguards against psychic control." But the safeguards had been compromised. Human intelligence agents had provided the ethereals with detailed information about swarm biotechnology, including the genetic sequences that could override the organism's loyalty programming. The Valddoran hegemony watched the younger species tear each other apart with what appeared to be ancient dignity until human data packets revealed the truth about Valddoran history. The evidence showed that the Valdderans had not developed their advanced technology through natural evolution. Instead, they had stolen it from other species that they had systematically exterminated over millions of years. Dr. Vasquez broadcast the historical records on all frequencies, ensuring that every civilization in the galaxy would learn the truth. The Valdderan hegemony is built on the bones of 1,000 extinct species. Every piece of their technology was taken from people they murdered to prevent competition. The revelation shattered the mystique that had surrounded Valdderan superiority for millennia. Species that had looked up to the Valdderans as ancient guardians of galactic order now saw them as nothing more than very old thieves and murderers. Supreme Commander, Yelseth tried to maintain control as her empire began to crumble from within. Vassal species that had served the Valdderans for generations suddenly declared independence. Ancient technologies that had been hoarded for millennia were stolen by rebels who used human intelligence to locate secret vaults and research facilities. This is all human manipulation. She broadcast to the remaining loyal worlds. They're providing information designed to turn us against each other, while they remain safely above the conflict. But the humans weren't remaining above the conflict. As each major power accepted their military assistance in exchange for political concessions, human fleets began appearing in combat zones across the galaxy. They fought with surgical precision, using their knowledge of enemy weaknesses to achieve victories that should have been impossible. Human ships appeared alongside Corvan forces, their weapons cutting through Zephyrian quantum shields as if they didn't exist. When ethereal mind controllers tried to turn human crews against each other, they found their psychic attacks being absorbed and redirected by unknown technology. Swarm bioweapons dissolved harmlessly against human hull armor that had been specifically designed to counter biological threats. Even ancient Valdderan energy weapons were neutralized by human defensive systems that seemed to predict every attack. Colonel Webb commanded the human battle group that engaged Valdderan forces near the Centauri system, the same region where human expansion had been stopped 3,000 years earlier. His fleet of 12 ships faced a Valdderan armada of over 50 vessels, including 3 planet-killer dreadnoughts. All human ships, this is Colonel Webb, he broadcast to his forces. Today we return to the place where our species almost died. Today we show them what we've become in the darkness between stars. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, the entire Valdderan armada had been disabled or destroyed without the loss of a single human ship. Colonel Webb's forces had used weapons that turned the Valdderan's own ancient technology against them, exploiting weaknesses that had existed for millions of years, but had never been discovered by anyone else. As news of human military victories spread across the galaxy, panic began to replace anger in the councils of the major powers. The species that had maintained the balance of power for a millennium were being systematically outfought by an enemy they had thought extinct. Admiral Thexara received hourly reports of Corvan defeats despite human assistance. His people's warrior culture, which had dominated galactic military thinking for centuries, was proving inadequate against enemies who knew every Corvan battle tactic and had developed specific counters for each one. How do they know so much about us? He asked Captain Chen during one of their regular strategy meetings. We've been studying you for 3,000 years, she replied. Every war you've fought, every weapon you've developed, every tactical doctrine you've published, we've learned from all of it. But more than that, we've had people embedded in your society for generations. She activated a holographic display showing photographs of Corvan military officers, government officials, and research scientists. Admiral Kexvorth of your 7th Fleet, General Mexteller of the Planetary Defense Corps, Director Vexquan of the Weapons Development Bureau, all human agents with genetic modifications and cybernetic implants that allowed them to pass as Corvans. Thexara stared at the images in horror. These were people he had known personally, officers he had served alongside, friends he had trusted with classified information. How many? He whispered. Enough. We have agents in every major government, every military organization, every research institution in the galaxy. We've been preparing for this day since before your great-grandfather was born. Similar revelations were being shared with the other major powers. The humans had infiltrated everyone, learned everyone's secrets, and were now using that knowledge to systematically dismantle the galactic order that had existed for 1,000 years. But the most devastating blow came not from military defeat or political manipulation. It came from the economic collapse that followed the revelation of human technological superiority. Dr. Vasquez released detailed specifications for human manufacturing techniques, energy generation methods, and transportation systems. The technology was freely available to anyone who wanted it, but it was so far advanced beyond current galactic standards that it rendered entire industries obsolete overnight. Trade routes that had operated for centuries became worthless when human cargo ships could transport goods between star systems in hours instead of weeks. Manufacturing worlds that had powered interstellar economies found themselves unable to compete with human automated systems that could produce higher quality goods at a fraction of the cost. Energy corporations watched their stock values collapse as human fusion technology made their power generation methods look primitive. Within a single month, the galactic economy had completely restructured itself around human technology and human trade partners. Species that had been rich and powerful found themselves dependent on human charity for basic necessities. Governments that had ruled for millennia discovered that their authority meant nothing when their people could get better services from human colonial administrations. The war between the major powers continued, but it no longer mattered who won. The humans had already achieved victory by making themselves indispensable to galactic civilization, while simultaneously proving that the old power structures were obsolete. Captain Chen stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, watching the lights of battle flicker across distant star systems. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a woman who carried the weight of her species' long exile, but whose eyes held the satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. "The balance is broken," she said to Dr. Vasquez, who had joined her at the observation window. "Completely. The major powers are too busy fighting each other to organize effective resistance against us, and they're too dependent on our technology to cut ties completely." "Any word from the Outer Rim monitoring stations?" Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. "The unknown entities have accelerated their approach. Our projections now suggest first contact within 30 years instead of 50. Captain Chen considered this information calmly. The approaching threat had been the justification for human intervention, but it had also provided the perfect cover for their real agenda. By the time the entities from the Galactic Rim arrived, humanity would be in complete control of civilized space. Then we need to move faster. How long until the major governments collapse completely? Based on current trends, 6 months at most. The Corvan Empire is already requesting human administrators for their core worlds. The Zephyrian Federation is talking about joining our colonial authority voluntarily. The others won't be far behind. Captain Chen smiled, and for the first time since revealing herself to the galaxy, the expression held genuine warmth. 3,000 years of exile. 3,000 years of learning, growing, and preparing. And finally, we're going home. Outside the window, the galaxy burned with the fires of war and change. But from the ashes of the old order, something new was being born. Something that would ensure humanity never again faced extinction for reaching toward the stars. 6 months after the first human ship appeared in the neutral zone, Admiral Thexara stood in the ruins of the Galactic Council chambers aboard Harmony Point Station. The once proud meeting place of the 5 major powers was now a refugee center, housing displaced populations from wars that had torn apart half the galaxy. The Corvan Empire had formally surrendered 3 weeks ago. The Zephyrian Federation had dissolved when their quantum research facilities were destroyed, and their leadership fled to human-protected territories. The ethereal collective had fragmented into dozens of smaller groups that could no longer maintain their shared consciousness. The swarm republics had seen their bioships turn against them so completely that entire worlds had been consumed by their own defensive organisms. Only the Valdderan hegemony maintained any semblance of independence, and that was because they had retreated to heavily fortified core worlds and cut off all contact with the rest of the galaxy. Captain Chen walked through the debris-strewn corridors of the station, surveying the damage with calm professional interest. She was no longer alone. Hundreds of human officers and administrators had arrived to begin the process of rebuilding galactic civilization under human guidance. "The refugee situation is stabilizing," reported Dr. Vasquez as she joined Chen in the Former council chambers. We've established temporary colonies for displaced populations from all major species. Medical aid is being distributed, and our cultural specialists are working to prevent ethnic conflicts in the mixed settlements. Good. What about resistance movements? Minimal and mostly symbolic. A few die-hard military groups are still fighting, but they lack the resources or popular support to pose a real threat. The general population seems more interested in survival than ideology at this point. Chen nodded and activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Vast sections of space that had once been controlled by the major powers now showed human administrative zones. The transformation had been swift and largely bloodless, accomplished more through economic and technological superiority than military conquest. Any word from Admiral Thexara's people? He's requested a meeting with you personally. I think he wants to discuss terms for full Corvin integration into the new system. Chen considered this. Thexara had been one of the more reasonable leaders during the collapse, trying to minimize civilian casualties even as his empire crumbled around him. He might be useful in the transition period. Set up the meeting. But first I want to address the refugees. They need to understand what we're building here. The main assembly hall of Harmony Point had been converted into a mixed species gathering area. Representatives from dozens of different civilizations sat together in groups that would have been unthinkable under the old system. Corvins shared medical supplies with Zephyrians. Ethereals used their remaining psychic abilities to comfort traumatized swarm survivors. Even a few Valdderans had emerged from hiding to seek human protection. Captain Chen stepped onto the raised platform where the old Galactic Council had once met. The crowd fell silent as she began to speak. Her words translated into dozens of languages by human communication systems. 6 months ago, most of you had never heard of humans except as a cautionary tale from ancient history. Today, human administrators are managing refugee camps, human doctors are treating your wounded, and human engineers are rebuilding your destroyed infrastructure. You might wonder why we're helping species that were part of the system that tried to exterminate us. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces representing the remnants of galactic civilization. The answer is simple. We're not interested in revenge. We're interested in making sure that what happened to Earth never happens to anyone else. A Corvin refugee in the front row raised his clawed hand. Chen nodded for him to speak. What do you want from us? What's the price for your help? Participation, Chen replied. The old system was based on balance between competing powers, each trying to prevent the others from becoming too strong. That led to stagnation, suspicion, and ultimately the violence you've all experienced. We're proposing something different. A cooperative government based on shared knowledge and mutual support. A Zephyrian female called out from the middle of the crowd. How do we know you won't just become the new oppressors? You've already demonstrated that you can defeat any of our militaries. Because oppression is inefficient, Dr. Vasquez answered, stepping up beside Chen. We spent 3,000 years hiding in the darkness, learning everything we could about galactic civilization. Do you know what we discovered? Every major advancement, every breakthrough in science or culture, came from cooperation between different species. The greatest achievements in galactic history happened when your people worked together, instead of against each other. She activated her own holographic display, showing historical examples of interspecies collaboration. The quantum drive was developed by Zephyrian physicists working with Valdderan mathematicians. The bioship technologies came from swarm researchers collaborating with ethereal psychic specialists. Even the plasma weapons that define Corvin military power were improved using metallurgy techniques learned from a dozen different species. But the old system made such cooperation rare, Chen continued. The Treaty of Equilibrium actually discouraged innovation, because new technologies might upset the balance of power. How many potential breakthroughs were lost because species were afraid of seeming too advanced? How many problems could have been solved if all our civilizations had been working together, instead of watching each other with suspicion? An elderly ethereal in the crowd stood up, her crystalline form dim with age. You speak of cooperation, but you've conquered us all. How is that different from what the Valdderans did millions of years ago? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Chen had expected it, but the answer was crucial. Everything depended on convincing the refugees that humanity offered genuine partnership, rather than just a more efficient form of tyranny. The difference is choice, she said simply. The Valdderans conquered other species by force and destroyed those who resisted. We've offered an alternative to a system that was already destroying itself. Every species, every world, every individual can choose whether to participate in what we're building. And if we choose not to participate? Asked a swarm drone whose biomodifications had been damaged in the fighting. Then you're free to rebuild your own civilizations however you see fit, Chen replied. We won't force anyone to join the new system, but we also won't provide support to governments that threaten other species or try to restart the old balance of power. Games. She gestured to the holographic displays, showing human technology and administrative systems. What we're offering is access to 3,000 years of accumulated knowledge, freely shared. Medical techniques that can extend lifespans for any species. Manufacturing methods that can provide abundance without environmental destruction. Transportation systems that can connect every world in the galaxy. Educational programs that can help each species reach its full potential. All we ask in return is commitment to the principle that no species should face extinction for political reasons. No more planet killers, no more genocide, no more wars of extermination. If you can accept that, then you're welcome to help us build something better than what came before. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then a young Corvan female stood up. My family was killed in the Zephyrian attacks on our homeworld. Under your system, would those responsible face justice? Yes, Chen answered without hesitation. But the justice system would be administered by representatives from all participating species, not just humans. War crimes are war crimes regardless of who commits them. A Zephyrian male called out angrily. And what about the Corvans who destroyed our research stations? Will they face the same justice? Absolutely. The new system won't play favorites based on species or political alignment. Everyone follows the same laws and faces the same consequences for breaking them. Over the next hour, Chen and her team answered hundreds of questions about the proposed new government. The details were complex, but the core principles were simple. Shared knowledge instead of hoarded secrets, cooperative development instead of competitive stagnation. Justice applied equally regardless of species or power level. When the session ended, Chen walked back through the station corridors with Dr. Vasquez and Colonel Webb, who had just arrived from the Outer Rim. How did the monitoring mission go? Chen asked him. Webb's expression was grim. The entities are definitely accelerating their approach. We detected massive energy buildups in dark matter construction sites. Whatever they're building, it's designed for war on a scale we've never seen. How long do we have? 15 years, maybe 20 if we're lucky. But Captain, I don't think luck is going to be enough. These things are using technology that makes our advances look primitive. Chen absorbed this information calmly. The approaching threat had been the justification for human intervention in galactic politics. But it was also a very real danger. The entities from beyond the galaxy's edge represented a challenge that would require every resource that civilized space could muster. Then we need to work faster. How many worlds have officially joined the new system? 312 so far, Dr. Vasquez reported, including most of the former Corvan colonies, about half of the Zephyrian worlds, and a significant portion of the smaller independent species. The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule. What about the major powers? The Corvan Empire is negotiating a formal transition to human administration. The Zephyrian Federation is likely to follow within months. The Ethereal Collective has fragmented, but most of the smaller groups are requesting human protection. The swarm republics are in chaos, but their surviving colonies are accepting our aid. And the Valdderans? Colonel Webb answered that question. Still hiding in their fortress worlds and refusing all communication. But our intelligence suggests they're suffering from internal rebellions. The historical revelations about their true nature have shattered their authority over vassal species. Chen nodded. The Valdderans had been the primary architects of the old system, and the ones most responsible for Earth's destruction. Their final collapse was inevitable, but she hoped it would come through internal pressure rather than military action. Too much blood had already been spilled. Admiral Thexera found her later that evening in the observation lounge where she often went to think. The former Corvan commander looked older than when she had first met him, worn down by months of defeat and change. Captain Chen, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Admiral, I understand you want to discuss Corvan participation in the new system. He sat down across from her, his forearms folded in a gesture that indicated formal respect. My people are a proud species. We've defined ourselves through strength and military honor for thousands of years. Now we find ourselves dependent on the charity of those we once considered extinct. It's difficult for us to accept, I understand. But pride and honor don't have to disappear just because the context changes. The galaxy is going to need warriors in the years ahead, just not warriors who fight each other. She activated a holographic display showing the monitoring data from the galactic rim. These entities, whatever they are, represent a threat unlike anything any of our species has faced before. When they arrive, we'll need every advantage we can get. That includes Corvan military expertise adapted to new types of warfare. Texara studied the sensor readings with professional interest. Dark matter manipulation on this scale. Conventional weapons would be useless. Exactly. But your people's understanding of tactics and strategy could be invaluable in developing new approaches. We're not trying to eliminate what made each species unique. We're trying to combine the best of all civilizations to create something stronger than the sum of its parts. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had seen and heard. Finally, he looked up at Chen with something approaching hope in his red eyes. If I were to recommend that the Corvan people accept full integration into your system, what would happen to our military traditions? They would be honored and preserved, but adapted to serve the common defense instead of national conquest. Your officers would train alongside humans, Zephyrians, Ethereals, and any other species that joined us. Your warriors would still have the chance to prove their courage, but against enemies that threaten all of civilization, rather than fellow galactic citizens. And our homeworlds would remain Corvan, with human advisors to help with the transition. We're not interested in cultural assimilation. We want cooperation between distinct species, not homogenization. Texara stood up and extended his primary hand in the human gesture of agreement that he had learned during their months of working together. Then on behalf of the Corvan people, I accept your offer. We will join the new order. Chen shook his hand, feeling the weight of history in the gesture. The Corvan Empire, one of the 5 great powers that had ruled the galaxy for a millennium, had just voluntarily dissolved itself to become part of something larger. Over the following months, similar scenes played out across civilized space. The Zephyrian Federation formally requested human administration after their last quantum research facility was destroyed by rebels. The ethereal collective's surviving fragments petitioned for protection and integration. Even some Valdderan worlds began to quietly surrender as their ancient government collapsed from within. The transformation wasn't without problems. Cultural conflicts arose in mixed colonies. Some species struggled to adapt to human technology. Resistance movements occasionally flared into violence. But for every problem that arose, human administrators, scientists, and peacekeepers worked with local populations to find solutions. Captain Chen stood once again in what had been the Galactic Council chambers, but the room looked very different now. Instead of 5 segregated sections for the major powers, the space had been redesigned as a circular amphitheater, where representatives from dozens of species sat together in mixed groups. Citizens of the new Galactic Union, she began, addressing the first truly representative assembly in the galaxy's recorded history. 1 year ago, this chamber hosted desperate negotiations between powers that saw each other as threats to be contained. Today it hosts planning sessions for the greatest cooperative effort in galactic history. The holographic displays around the chamber showed construction projects on a scale that would have been impossible under the old system. Massive shipyards where vessels designed by combined human-alien engineering teams were taking shape. Research stations where scientists from every species worked together to develop new technologies. Defense platforms being built using the best knowledge from all civilizations. The entities approaching from the galactic rim represent a test of everything we've built together, Chen continued. But I believe we're ready for that test. Not because humanity has conquered the galaxy, but because the galaxy has finally learned to work as one. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward with the latest reports from the monitoring stations. Long-range sensors show the entities have begun accelerating their approach. First contact is now projected within 8 years, but our combined fleets will be ready. Colonel Webb added his own assessment. The new ship designs incorporate technological advances from all participating species. Our weapons can counter dark matter manipulation. Our shields can withstand energy discharges that would have destroyed the old fleets. Most importantly, our crews are trained to work together instead of against each other. Chen looked out at the assembled representatives, seeing hope where there had once been suspicion. The balance of power that kept peace for 1,000 years has been replaced by something better. The unity of purpose that will ensure peace for millennia to come. In the months that followed, the last of the old order finally crumbled. The Valdderan hegemony collapsed when their own vassal species rose up and demanded justice for millions of years of oppression. But even then, human forces intervened not to complete the conquest, but to prevent wholesale massacre and help establish new governments based on cooperation rather than domination. Captain Sarah Chen, now director of the Galactic Union, stood in her office aboard the newly constructed Unity Station and looked out at the stars. The galaxy was still healing from the wounds of transformation, but it was healing. Species that had been enemies for centuries were learning to work together. Technologies that had been hoarded by the major powers were being shared freely. Most importantly, no world would ever again face destruction simply for reaching toward the stars. When the entities from beyond the galaxy's edge finally arrived, they would find not a collection of competing civilizations weakened by centuries of suspicion and conflict. They would find a united galaxy, strengthened by the diversity of its peoples and defended by the combined knowledge of every species that called it home. The children of Earth had indeed come home, but they hadn't come as conquerors. They had come as gardeners, helping the galaxy grow into something greater than it had ever been before. And in the process, they had ensured that never again would any species face extinction for daring to dream of the stars.